strategist for Andrew Exler Consulting.
Great. How's everybody doing? Just want to make sure you can hear me, see me well. Everything's good. Great. Well, before I get started, Ellie, that was great. Really appreciate hearing from you and doing a little bit of research on your background. Definitely a lot for myself to learn. So I'm sure everybody on here as well could really take away a lot of what she was talking about. And I'm sure I might do some overlap. And while I'm speaking over the next few minutes, I definitely encourage questions through the chat, trying to keep this interactive. I'm not a huge fan of talking at people for too long. So if I start rambling, please stop me. I'm not sure who it was, but someone mentioned a 9-to-5 accounting job when they were asking Ellie a question. And that couldn't be like the best setup of everything I'm going to talk about as to how I went from working in professional sports to working in a nonprofit to getting an accounting degree and then starting my own social media business. So 4 totally out of the world, unrelated industries, and how I've been able to hit every single one in the last 8 years of my career, and why. And I think that's the most important lead into this. So starting off, just a little bit about my background. Again, my name is Andrew Exler, born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the United States. Anyone, I don't know how many American sports fans we might have on the call, but if there's any Pittsburgh Steelers fans on, that'd be a nice little touch and give me a nice little bias on everybody here. But being born and raised in Pittsburgh, I wanted to work. I see we got a message come through. I'll take the Phillies. That's fine. Growing up in a sports town, I played sports my whole life. I played lacrosse in college, and I wanted to work in sports. I knew that immediately. Once really I was able to comprehend what I was watching, if I was watching a game or going to sporting events with my dad. And I went to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, majored in sport management there. Love it. Majored in sport management at Ohio University, which is one of the top sports management programs in the country. And as soon as I graduated, I was one of the lucky ones who had a job with the Columbus Blue Jackets of the National Hockey League. That was the first job of my career. I met the employer when they came to a career fair at Ohio U. And May 2013, I started as an inside sales representative with the Blue Jackets. My office was in Nationwide Arena, one of the most beautiful arenas in the National Hockey League, one of the just best arenas in sports. And for the first couple of months, it was amazing. I got to work in there. I got to eat my lunch break while watching the Blue Jackets do their morning skates, or the visiting teams would be practicing before a game. It was great. And then over time, I started to just really get dragged down and burn out. I found myself, when I would go home to Pittsburgh for a weekend and maybe I'd go to a Pittsburgh Penguins hockey game, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near it. I wouldn't want to go to sporting events anymore. I would be so burnt out of actually working and being at the venue all the time. It took the personal joy away from me. And kind of what I started to say was, I realized very quickly I'd rather work my day job and then have tickets to go enjoy a beer and some popcorn and a hot dog with a friend of mine. And so that was my moment that I left the sports world. And this is really important to talk about, because a lot of people will say in similar positions, that job sucked, my boss sucked, I didn't get paid enough, whatever it was. And for me, the experience was great. And what's really important is how much I learned. Working in sales, even though I didn't necessarily want to take my career down a path of making 100 phone calls a day working in sales, I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to sell myself. I learned how to be confident in front of other people. And it's so important to take away what you're learning if you are going to move on. So from there, I went to work for a nonprofit leadership organization for teenagers in the United States. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for a year, and then I actually had an opportunity to move back to Pittsburgh, and I became the regional director of an organization here in Pittsburgh where I managed about 250 teenagers, as well as alumni. I did a lot of fundraising that was great. I was managing all the budgets. I was doing all of our direct fundraising. I was doing all of our programming. I was getting a lot of really great real world experience, and I was only 23 years old at this point. And when I was there, I started thinking, like, what else can I be doing right now? Because I enjoyed the work I was doing, but I felt like I wasn't doing enough. I kind of had a lot of downtime. So I went to the University of Pittsburgh and got an accounting degree. And so this is where that accounting part is coming in. I got an accounting degree. I thought, all right, accounting is a real career. This is something people go do this. They can go make money. And that's that. I went to Pitt for 2 years, got my accounting degree, and then I was lucky after 5 years with the nonprofit I was with, I got a job as an accountant. So I did have that 9-to-5 accounting job, and it was very different than anything I was used to. It wasn't sports like I wanted to be in. It wasn't the nonprofit world where I was pretty much able to work remotely. I was able to manage my own schedule. My supervisor at the time was based in St. Louis, Missouri. So I didn't really have somebody tracking me down, and I worked very well independently. And then something I talked with, as I was asked to give this speech, they wanted me to talk a little bit more about my personal journey and how I got to consulting, which I promise I'm getting to. Being born and raised in Pittsburgh, I'm also Jewish. And if you're aware, about 2 years ago, there was a tragedy here in Pittsburgh where there was a synagogue shooting. 11 people were shot and murdered. Sadly, that was my synagogue. I'm on the board of trustees at that synagogue. I actually manage their social media as a volunteer thing. And after that happened here, I realized I didn't want to do accounting. I went to accounting for the wrong reasons. I thought it was just going to be a compensation thing, and I thought that was going to be that. And after the shooting here, I realized that a lot of what I was doing in college and high school, I was doing a lot of social media management for people just for fun. I never thought of it as a job. And again, I know I'm continuing to talk about how I'm going from industry to industry, but a lot of this will summarize itself. So after that happened in Pittsburgh, I really realized that I wanted to just be happy. I wanted to do work that was natural to me. And I started to have conversations, and I would talk to people, and they said, well, you're doing this volunteer social media either for your synagogue or for family businesses, or you help friends set them up. Maybe you should consider doing something like this full time. And I wasn't really sure. I didn't know how I could make social media a job outside of maybe some like helping people freelancing versus having to go to an agency where a lot of these major agencies run social media brands. And I took the leap, and that's where my consulting journey started. So going back a little bit, started in sports. I was in the nonprofit world. I went into accounting, and then I had a very life-changing moment for myself about 2 years ago here in Pittsburgh. And I just took the leap into consulting. I said, you know what, I'm going to figure it out. I spent a few months really building up what my business is, which is now called Andrew Exler Consulting. I do social media management for nonprofits, startups, and small businesses. That's who I really target. I'm not going after businesses who need to have a $15,000 a month contract and the ones who need ad spending and all of this targeted marketing. I'm going to the businesses who they need a presence. And I can't tell who's on the call, assuming that there's a lot of people in the younger generations, you all understand how valuable the virtual world is, especially in the past 6 months once a global pandemic hits. So I'm working with a lot of businesses who need a presence. They need someone to work with. If it's a restaurant, they need to be posting their specials and highlighting their best customers. If it's a flower shop, for example, they need to be taking pictures of floral arrangements that they're putting out, talking about the story about their business that's 75 years old. Even the accounting firms, who I actually manage the social media for the accounting firm I used to work for. And how can you make accounting exciting in the social media world? And how can you make it attractive? And how can you make it make an accounting firm something that people are going to notice and remember when it's time to get your taxes done or you're getting audited for whatever your business is? So for myself, it was taking those steps along the way. A lot of downfalls, a lot of experiences, a lot of learning opportunities. And how can I turn anything that I crossed into an opportunity to say, okay, what did I learn and how is that going to help me move forward? So now that I've been doing this consulting for about a year, I launched my consulting business last November. So we're almost at 12 months. I really took a look back and I said, well, when I was in sports, I learned how to talk to people, plain and simple. I learned how to be a great communicator. When I was in the nonprofit world and I was doing a lot of my management, I was in charge of all the budgets. I was in charge of the people. I was still in charge of the programmatic planning. I went to the accounting world, which wasn't a career for me, but I got an accounting degree. And if you're familiar with accounting, it's the language of business. Having that degree has helped me so much in all the budgeting, all of my financial needs, especially in the tax planning that you now have to do as an independent contractor. And with some of the clients that I'm working with, there's a lot of tax implications that go into the work that you're doing. And the best part is, excuse me if you hear some barking, my dog's just walked in my room. The biggest piece of everything is that I learned along the way is to stop worrying about what other people are doing. And young people specifically get so blinded by the success of their friends. If you have a friend just out of college who lands a great job and they're making $300,000, it's very easy to look at what you're doing and say, all right, well, I'm not anywhere near what they're doing. I'm a failure. And it's so important to measure and really scale what is success. For a lot of people, you're not going to be successful in your eyes until you're 40 or 45 years old. Sure, some friends of yours might be doing really well when they're younger, but it's so important to just keep going and being happy where you are. And I can go into another tangent talking about the way the world kind of sets up young professionals for failure, that we're really forced into thinking that once you get into your first job out of college or whenever you get a new job, that you have to stay in that job for X amount of time. And if you leave early, your reputation's tarnished, your resume is going to be worthless. And it's very much not true. I graduated college in 2013. I've experienced 4 different industries, but the difference between myself and a lot of people in similar situations is I've gone to employers or to potential clients and said, here's my background and here's what I learned along the way. So I'm able to sell every step versus someone might say, I worked in sports and my boss stunk. I worked in accounting and it was boring. And that's not the way to go. So it's all about your perspective and how you're really framing your mindset. Just looking at a few more of my notes. And the biggest thing for me, I know Ellie mentioned a little bit about a side hustle and the word side hustle. But for me, my side hustle became my profession. I did social media for fun. I never even thought for a second until someone brought it up to me that, hey, you should consider doing this. And between that and networking, I'm very big on LinkedIn, and as a social media manager, I'm very big on social media, and I definitely recommend connecting with me. Besides this conversation and any Q&A that we might have in a few minutes, feel free to reach out to me, talk anytime. I also do some life coaching as well, talking a lot more targeted towards the young professional demographic, and then getting into the consulting world. It's been the best decision I've ever made. I get to manage my own schedule. I get to work with a variety of different clients. I talked a little bit about the flower shops and the accounting firms. I also work in the esports world. Professional video games that's the biggest client that I work with, where I manage all social media and strategy for an esports organization that's global. And that has been an unbelievable door that has been opened up to me by wanting to get into the consulting world and really just grinding over the last 365 days. Once I knew I was done in accounting and I knew that this is it, this is what my career is going to be, that there's been no turning back. So very excited to hear any questions. Happy to talk about the job, about Pittsburgh, about the synagogue. I'm very open to what led me to where I am today. So I appreciate everybody being on here for the staff team and for Ellie speaking alongside me. So happy to open this up to questions.
Yeah, if anyone has questions, please raise your hand and just unmute yourself. Yes, Zoe, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for that. That was really interesting. I was just wondering, how did you find the transition between something becoming your hobby or your side hustle, I think you called it, and then turning that into your profession? Like, did you enjoy it so much or perhaps differently once that was the case?
Sure, that's a great question. I mean, that transition was so hard for me at first because it was like I would wake up every morning and I'd go into my office, which is in my spare bedroom, and say, all right, this is your job now, go. Ready, go. And sure, there were some clients that I worked with prior that, again, like I said, I was doing some of this for free for people while I was still in accounting and while I was still working in sports. And once I really jumped in, I had to come up with a full business plan of what am I doing? How do I go get new clients? How do I promote myself? Because now it's not just Andrew Exler doing social media work for people. It's Andrew Exler Consulting is a social media agency. And a lot of it, and it's still a learning process for me. I actually just became an LLC as of a month ago, where I was operating as a sole proprietor for the last 11 months. So it's really learning every day and making sure that you are very protected on all aspects of what you're doing and being able to now separate your business from your personal life. And it took about a year to get there, but the transition was all about accepting that you're going to have really tough days, you're going to have really great days, and being able to work through it and keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I think we have a question in the chat.
Yes. What are some ways in which you were able to build the reputation of your consultancy startup, especially across multiple industries? It was more of less talking, more doing and showing what I can do. And a lot of I listen to a ton of different podcasts. And if anyone here has ever heard of Gary Vaynerchuk, he's probably my favorite entrepreneur to follow. When it comes to reputation and if you want to get into something, it's not about applying for a job. It's just going and doing it and just getting started and showing people what you can do, because someone can come on here and tell me how great they are at social media, and they can talk about engagement and impressions and talk about social media analytics, which is great. But until someone sends me a portfolio of here's screenshots of posts that I've done, here are the different clients that I've worked with, without sounding too rude, it's pretty meaningless. The biggest thing with reputation is just doing. Showing people what you can do, offering to do stuff for free, especially at the start, offering yourself as a free intern, anything you can do to get your foot in the door. And then on the other side of that, it's your network and what you're doing online and what your online presence is. For me, if I wanted to work in social media, I know I had to have a personal presence on there. There's a lot of great people who work in social media who their personal profiles aren't really prevalent, and that's great. But on LinkedIn, if you follow me on LinkedIn, on Twitter specifically, I really create a presence out there where I offer a lot of guidance. I have a blog on my website, a weekly professional development blog, where it can range from the top 5 things that you need to know if you want to do social media versus just talking a little bit about life and what to do if you're having a low part of it. If you're really experiencing peaks and valleys and you're at a very low part of your life, how do you get out of that? So doing everything that you can do, offering yourself for free, and then just experimenting a little bit and understanding you're going to fail probably multiple times, but learning every time that you fail.
All right. Thank you for that. Manahil, go ahead.
Hi there, Andrew. Hey, I have a question about something that you said earlier, which was it sort of struck me, and this probably isn't the most traditional consulting job question, but you said you were doing it for the wrong reasons. And so I think I'm conscious of time, but I guess I wanted to ask was, for someone who's in that process right now, in their final year, looking for work, there is pressure from all around you, from people landing these jobs, these wonderful jobs. What advice would you give to someone in my position? What is one thing that, if you could look back at yourself when you were just getting out of college, what was it that you would have said to yourself? What advice would you give?
There's so much that I wish I knew when I was 22 years old and graduating college. Obviously, hindsight is 20/20, so I can look back and go tell my 22-year-old self all of this stuff. But the biggest thing, at least from my experience, and it might be different in the United States and in our high school system and our collegiate system, is we were set up for failure. You're kind of taught that your first job out of college has to be a 5-year job. And if you leave early, you better have a great reason as to why you're leaving early. And on your resume, you better be able to explain it. And then you have to look and see, here's where your friend Joe is, who you graduated with. You might have had the same grades. And a lot of it really is about who you know. I mean, at the end of the day, what you do is great, but some people are in the place they're in because of who they know, and that's not discounting how great of a person they are. It's really just understanding of, you need to look before you accept a job offer. Talk to the people who work for that business and ask them what their experiences are. Talk to people who used to work there and ask them why they left. And sure, you might get some people who are upset for certain reasons, and you need to be able to look through that and really see deeper. Asking employers about what the benefits are and asking them why they love their job so much, because you could tell pretty quickly if someone's in a job because they just need to be in it, or if they genuinely love what they're doing. So when I was working in sports, a lot of people, now that I look back, they were there because working in sports is cool, but a lot of people were fairly miserable where I was, and nobody works there anymore from the time that I was there. but the best advice is just do what's going to make you happy. If you have a hunch that something feels off, or that you're doing a job or getting into a job for a wrong reason, there's usually a reason that hunch is there. Like I mentioned, the wrong reasons for me with accounting was, all right, people can be accountants, lawyers, doctors. You're going to be successful if you get into that. So I went back to school. I got my accounting degree. I worked in accounting for 2 years, but I knew I was way too extroverted to be sitting in a corner office 8 hours a week, especially during tax season. And I became great friends with some of the people I worked with. But for me, I knew sitting in an office all day was not for me. I needed to be out in front of people. My favorite part of being an accountant were the times when clients would come in and we would go over their material, but that's only 10% of the job, was me actually getting face-to-face interaction. So for myself, I knew I needed something that was more people-facing, and it's different for everybody, but really being able to look past what a salary might be and understanding like what your mental well-being is going to be in a job.
That's incredibly helpful. Thank you so much.
Sure. Happy to talk offline about that if you need.
Is there anyone else for the question? Otherwise, I have a couple I can ask as well. So what would you say has been your biggest high so far, ever since throughout your whole journey, or since you started Andrew Exler Consulting?
Sure. The shirt I'm wearing right now, it's for a company called Lost Tribe Esports. That's the esports organization I work for. My biggest high is them. Honestly, it's a 2-year-old startup esports organization. Whenever I started Andrew Exler Consulting, I happened to know the CEO at the time for Lost Tribe right when they were just getting started, and I reached out to him and I said, I know you're new. You don't have a social media presence. What are your thoughts on me working with you 2 or 3 hours a week just to build something up? And so they said yes. I was working for them, very contracted, a few hours a week. And now a year later, it's interesting with them. I'm like in a full-time position, but I'm actually a contracted employee. So I have a title as I'm technically their director of content and strategy. And we have taken their social media platforms from 0 into the thousands. Our engagement there is over 50,000 people a week. We are actually doing a lot of gaming tournaments and leagues. And the pandemic has been a very interesting curveball that was thrown at the esports world, because while a lot of businesses really struggled when the pandemic hit, it took the esports world right into the moon because the virtual space is so important. And that was really the only thing that people have been able to do for the past couple of months. So my absolute high is being able to see that I took a risk. I reached out, offered myself just a few hours a week, and it turned into being my biggest client and probably my best success story thus far.
Thank you. I think Robin has a question. Go ahead, Robin.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so my question would be, so I'm sure there were a lot of fears that were associated with like changing industries that many times, because it's always getting into this new, I guess, territory that you don't know. So my question is, what was the qualities of your mindset that helped you get through those fears and those obstacles?
Sure. It's a great question. And I mean, I'll tell you now, if you're someone who's listening to this and you're kind of thinking and a lot of what I'm saying is resonating with you, don't quit your job tomorrow, please. No matter how miserable it might be, don't do that. For me, it was all about having a plan. I was able to look at myself again, and I wrote down, here is what I learned every step along the way. So if I'm asked, why did you only work in sports for 9 months whenever you went and you majored in sport management? Your whole career and your whole life talks about how much you love sports. What happened? You clearly either had a bad experience or you weren't good at your job. And actually, I was offered a chance to be promoted with that organization, and I turned it down because I didn't want to be there. It is all about having a mindset of learning along the way and having a plan. So once I knew that the accounting world was done for me, so that happened right after the tragedy happened. That was October 2018. I didn't leave for another year. I didn't start my business till a full year later. But that right around when that happened was when I started writing up the plans. Here's what my business is going to be named. Here are the type of people I want to target. Here's what I'm going to do over the next year. And I'm also going to be transparent to my employer. And I let them know, just so you know, I'm probably going to be making the transition at some point, but it was also tax season, which in the accounting world, you don't want to leave an employer high and dry. So I was very transparent with my employer that I'm going to do everything I can to leave you in the best place possible and give you as much time. But at the end of the day, it was all about planning ahead and trying to be as positive as possible. Whenever I talk to people who either want to work for me or intern for me, I always listen to the way that they talk about their past experiences. If they talk about how their boss was mean to them or they didn't get along with anybody, it's very different than someone talking about how much they learned from their boss, even though it might not have been the best relationship at all the time, and how they were able to learn and what a weakness was. That's another big thing I talk about. Is it is so easy for someone to tell me what they're good at. I'm impressed when someone can tell me what their weaknesses are and say, here's what I'm trying to do to work on it. Because, yeah, of course, people love talking about themselves, but it's very, very hard to say, I made a mistake. It's very hard to ask for help. And those are the type of people that really impress me the most.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Are there any more questions? I actually have one more. If there aren't any others. So what would you say about the importance of having a partner or having a team when running your own business or entrepreneurial activity?
Sure, it really depends. I reached out to, I'll rewind a little bit. Less about a partner, but having a mentor or having an advisor or someone that you can go to for help is so important, because I have a mentor who is like a brother to me, who was there for me every step along the way. I've known my entire life. And he was the one who helped me build everything that I started to do. He actually, when I started talking to him about branding one day, and 5 days later, he sends me a logo package of hundreds of different logo options for my business, and ended up really helping me get my start. And I remember having a conversation with him basically saying, should I consider finding someone else who's really good at social media and bringing them in and going 50-50 and really helping them grow? And I am so happy he told me not to. And that's just because whenever you're in a growing stage, you have to know what type of business you want to do, and sometimes understand, what is my end game? Am I going into business with the goal of selling it after 5 years? Or am I going into business with the goal of, it's really just going to be myself? I don't want to have a lot of employees. Maybe I have a couple independent contractors who work with me. So it's less about figuring out who you're going to work with and figure out what your personal goals are. With Andrew Exler Consulting, I'd love to scale it one day into a social media agency, but it wasn't in a place where I needed to necessarily have a team with me. Whereas with Lost Drive Esports, whenever I started there a year ago, I was the third employee. We now have 9 employees and a team of around 15 interns and brand ambassadors that I oversee. And in that organization, without that team, there would be no success. I oversee the social media team and I manage the interns there, but the work that I've done is almost meaningless because it wouldn't have happened without having that team. So it's so important just to know what your end goal is first, and then track back of, all right, now can I find the right partner, or is this something where I want to do this on my own for the next 6 months and then I can reassess?
That makes sense. Thank you so much. I think I'm conscious of time. I think it's 8:31 now. So if there are no more questions, Robin has one more, I think.
Yeah. So my question is, so for like every entrepreneur, there's this drive to continually like improve your business, create something great, create something more. But it's sort of really hard to balance that between also being content with life and being happy where you are. Would you have any tips or advice on how to balance the two?
Oh yeah. It's hard to separate. If you're going to be an entrepreneur or being a consultant, you are not going to have a 9 to 5. You're not going to be going to happy hour with your friends at 5 o'clock at the end of the day. You're not necessarily going to have your weekends free. But for me, I am so much happier working 80 hours a week for myself than 40 for somebody else. And at the end of the day, it is as simple as that. It's understanding that this is not going to be easy. It is a grind. You're going to be working on weekends. I don't want to say your relationships suffer, because mine don't. I'm very good with time management. I think that's one of my best strengths. So I have 2 dogs. So I'm up at 5 a.m. anyways, walking my dogs and getting my day started. And I go to the gym before 7 a.m. So I still have an entire day. It's just starting to figure out what your sleep schedule is. I wake up and I do some work on Saturdays and Sundays, but I also make sure that I keep my phone in my bedroom when I'm eating dinner with my fiance. When I go out for walks with my dogs, or I'm hanging out with friends, I really try to leave my phone away. The most recent change I've made is I've taken my email off of my phone completely, especially with the pandemic and how tied we are to technology. It's so important to be able to make that separation. People who work with me, clients of mine, they know if they need to reach me, they can call me or text me, because I'm not going to respond to an email on a Saturday at 4:30 in the afternoon unless it's an absolute emergency. So it's figuring out what works best for you, but understanding that you compared to your friends who are working desk jobs and cubicle jobs, it's going to seem like they have a lot more freedom that you do, especially your first 3 years. But once you just get on track, it is the best feeling ever. It's the best thing I've ever done.
Thank you so much for that advice. That was great.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Andrew. I think all of what you've said and all of what Ellie's said has been really helpful, really inspiring for all of us here who've attended the event today. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, I think it was really nice to listen to everyone talk today. And thank you to the audience as well for asking really good, insightful questions.
Yeah, so, thanks everyone.
Of course. Yeah, thank you very much. This was great.
Great. All right. Take care, everyone.